Hey, HRN listeners, mark your calendars for Sunday, October 13th. HRN and the National Young Farmers Coalition are teaming up for a special event at Churchtown Dairy in Hudson, New York. In honor of National Farmers Day, we'll be celebrating with local food, a screening of the documentary Common Ground, and a live panel featuring Lee Penniman of Soulfire Farm, Chris Nickel of Finca Ceremos, and more. The first 50 people to register get a free gift at the door. It's a fundraiser for young farmers and HRN supporting farmer leadership, HRN's education programs, and Farm Bill advocacy. Don't miss out. Head to support.youngfarmers.org/cgfilm to reserve your ticket today.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. For more information, visit korin.com.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hello, welcome to Panisse. I'm your host, Kamiyama, a food writer and director of the New York Japanese Culinary Academy, which promotes a deep understanding of Japanese cuisine in America. We are broadcasting live from Brooklyn, New York. This show is all about Japanese food and food culture. We see sushi every day in the supermarket, but what is beyond sushi? We hear dashi ramen izakaya, but what exactly are they? Japanese food is still a mystery for many people, and I try to demystify it in this program with my good guests. And my guest today is Jerome, who is the former chef at the legendary farm-to-table restaurant Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California. Jerome moved to Tokyo in 2016 to open his own restaurant, Blind Donkey. Blind Donkey has been successful, and in March 2024, Jerome has opened another restaurant called CIMI Restaurant with a strong focus on sustainability. He has been also involved in the inspiring project, the Food Hub Project, in a small town called Kamiyama in Shikoku Island, which aims to revitalize the local community. Today they will discuss how Jerome opened his restaurant in Japan, his unique experience of running a successful restaurant in Tokyo, his new restaurant CIMI, and its vision for sustainable food, his role in revitalizing the rural town Kamiyama, and much, much more. But before we start, Panisse is available on the Heritage Radio Network website, as well as on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify as a podcast. So please go to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, whichever you listen to, and subscribe to Panisse. And please write a review. We really appreciate your feedback. Now, let's start a conversation with Jerome. Hello, Jerome. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
So, you are a famous person of all those great experiences, but just to get to know you for listeners who are not too familiar with you. So where are you from and what did you eat when you grew up?
I was born in France and I grew up mostly in the south of France, between Provence and Côte d'Azur.
And then sounds like you really had the best part of French cuisine. What did you eat when you grew up?
I spent a lot of time in Provence where my mother had a house. She had a house all her life, and she in Provence, and she loved to cook. And she was, there's a lot of markets. Each little town has a market on a different day of the week, etc. And she knew all the good place to go and to get the right goat cheese, and the little farmer would come at 8:30 in the morning and just be there for an hour because everything was gone. So I grew up within that kind of culinary kind of passion.
Right. So it totally makes sense that you worked at the legendary, still very powerful and highly influential sustainable restaurant, Chez Panisse in California, which Alice Waters opened in 1971. I think she was inspired by the environment where you grew up in. So how did you get involved in Chez Panisse, and what was your role at Chez Panisse?
So my mother had a little restaurant in a town called Vence, near Nice on the French Riviera, and a couple customer who really liked the restaurant had spent time in Berkeley, And somehow they were studying in Berkeley, and they met Alice Waters, and they became friends. And so when they came at the restaurant, they told my mother, "Oh, we have this friend in America. You should meet her because I think you guys would get along." And that was probably like in the early 70s. So Chez Panisse was probably only like a few years old. And when Alice came to visit France, she came to my mother's house, the one in Provence, and they went to the market together, and they became good friends. So Alice told my mother, "Hey, if you want to come in California, you can work at Chez Panisse." And that's how I was introduced to Chez Panisse and Alice when I was, I think at the time, 14-year-old maybe.
Wow.
And
so it's almost like a destiny.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
and I went there when I was 17, and I stayed for a month, and then my went back to France to finish high school, and my brother and mother stayed behind in Berkeley, and then I came back in the early 80s, and Alice said, if you want to work at the restaurant, you can work there, and so I started bussing tables. And I have to say I wasn't very good at it. So after a while, they loved me, but they say, maybe you want to try the kitchen. So I started working in the kitchen, and basically like making rolling pasta for like 300 people by hand, and washing salad. And slowly, I made my way to cooking in the cafe, and then cooking in the restaurant. In the meantime, I went back and forth to France. So I was living like a couple of years in California, a couple of years in France, and then like in the early 90s, Alice came to visit my mother again, and I was in France, and she said, "If you want, we're looking for somebody to work downstairs in a restaurant." And so that's how I started working at the restaurant.
Right. So whoever listeners who have not been to Chez Panisse, there are 2 floors, and it's very homey, comfortable, but the downstairs is casual. And I'm not saying that upstairs is formal, but it's slightly different menus,
It's
right?
the other way around, yeah. The upstairs is the cafe.
Right.
And that's a little bit more casual, yeah. And the restaurant has a fixed menu that changes every day. And that's something we can talk about. And that's 4 courses, so it's a little bit more formal, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then I remember you could see the kitchen where you worked. And this kind of energy, very interesting, kind of absorbing energy from the kitchen. And you become a part of the whole world of Chez Panisse. And I really enjoyed that. Being there itself is something more than just restaurant. So, and you were there for 24 years. And so what was the learning from that 24 years that you had at Chez Panisse?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I learned a lot. It really sort of, for one thing, I learned to cook because I wasn't much of a cook when I started working there. And even when I started working downstairs, I think Alice, she knew my mother, she knew where I grew up. And so for her, it was important to have me in the kitchen. But as far as my skills, I was not very skilled at that time yet. So I really, I learned to cook. I would say I learned how to make things taste good. That's kind of one thing that I could sort of think the most important thing that I've learned there. Yeah, because the menu changes every day, so it's a new menu every day. And as a cook downstairs, you get to do so many different things. So one day you can be doing a soup, the next day you can be spit roasted shoulders of pork, the following day you're doing a salad, and since it changes all the time, it has to be always spot on. And so you really, and each time we would do, just before we started serving the food, we would do tasters, and so everybody would taste everybody's dishes, and there you really learn how to tweak something so it works and make it kind of like pop out. And so it's very, I think it's very different from most restaurants. It's very live, and it's very sort of intuitive, and yeah, it's always different.
Right,
So
and also, yeah, you have
yeah.
to change the menu every day because you follow the nature's instruction, right? Because here's the food, you have to cook it, instead of a head chef telling you, this is the menu I developed and you cook it. So it's like you're part of the nature and you have to change it because you live in the nature, following part of nature.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, like right now, more like in Kamiyama, for example, I work with the restaurant there, and we change the menu every week, which is kind of a little more easier to manage. And I think that's something that she wanted from the beginning, to really keep things alive and not kind of take food for granted, and keep sort of challenging the chef and the cooks. And because Japanese food is fairly simple, I mean, in some ways. Alice always said that it's home cooking, but it's a little more than that. But what I think, when it really works, it's really about this sort of spontaneity and this real freshness. And that's something else that I learned, is like, there is to do everything at the last minute. So we don't make sauces for a week, or we never keep things in like plastic bottles and stuff like that. It's all like really happening, and the more you can do at the last minute, the better. I think that's kind of another little secret of this kind of food.
Right. So the direct connection with nature and the flavor shines because there's no manipulation in between. So, but then you carried that essence of cooking and mindset, and you moved to Japan in 2016 to open your own restaurant. So how was your relationship with Japan before the move? Because you just don't pack up and then go to Japan, right? So
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a strange story, but when I was young, I watched a lot of Japanese movies. And I was just talking about that with a Japanese friend yesterday, actually. And I really loved Japanese movie, Akira Kurosawa, and then in my teens, those movies sort of made a the big influence on me. And I also was interested in Zen. About 20 years ago, I even spent 2 years in a Zen monastery in California.
wow.
Studying Zen. So there was those two things, and strangely, I can't really tell you why. I used to say like, oh, if I go to Japan, I'll never come back. But like now, when I think about it, I was like, why was I thinking that? It was very strange. And then while I was, something else about Japanese that I should mention is that early on, when I started working in the downstairs kitchen, a few years into it, I asked if I could work only 3 days a week because I wanted to have an art practice, and I needed to do other things than just cooking. And they accepted, and they actually let me work for the next 15 years, just 3 days a week. And so I had this art practice that I ended up creating an art collective called Open Restaurant. And we made sort of big shows. We had sort of a little bit of a local success. So we did a couple sort of pretty big events with the San Francisco Art Museum, the Oakland Museum, and basically was using artists to talk about food and food politics. And my partner in there wanted to come to Japan and do that in Japan. And I thought it was crazy because it was very much like a big project that really had to do about community and having a lot of people come and do all these things with us. I said, how are we going to do this in Japan? We don't know anybody. But he was kind of connected, and then we had some friends, and so we ended up in, like, I don't know, 12 years ago, something like that, 13 years ago, doing a whole series of events in Tokyo for a month. And there were pop-ups and classes and performances. I mean, all kind of stuff. It was 25 people from California came, and so I met a lot of people then, and in Tokyo, and a lot of designers and artists and chefs, of course. And that's how I got involved in being in Japan.
Right. We'll talk about your artist being you artist later, but it's interesting. Like, you gradually, even before you notice, you gradually kind of paved the way to go to Japan, and it's interesting, and it kind of like makes sense, the food connection and the art.
Yeah, I came here like for 5 or 6 years, and then when the last 4 years, I became the chef. One of the chefs of the restaurant, because there was 2 chefs, and at that time the chefs were working 6 months each, and that's changed now. And so basically I had 6 months every year where I could do pretty much whatever I wanted, and so I had a lot of time to spend, and I could come and stay like a month in Japan and go visit people and meet people.
Right. Well, sounds like you are a human person and freely develop your interest and follow it. So, and then eventually you opened your restaurant, Blind Donkey, in 2017. And since the opening, the restaurant has been very popular, and I read many media articles. So what is the concept of Blind Donkey?
Yeah, so Blind Donkey was sort of bring this sort of California, Chez, Panisse vibe, if you want, in Tokyo, because I felt like there was not a lot of restaurants who were cooking like that, and especially doing a lot of vegetables, and the concept was really to be sort of a front window for alternative farming in Japan. So that was really to bring attention to the work of farmers, was really or it still is, our sort of driving motivation. And when we make a dish at the Blind Donkey, we said that, we do half of it and the farmers do the other half. So it's really a collaboration with small organic or natural farmers. And we spend, before we started, I started with my partner was a chef called Shin Harakawa, with a little restaurant called Beard. And so we started working out of his restaurants where I was cooking, and then he became sort of more like the server and the manager. And then it was very small restaurant, so the rent was pretty cheap, and we would close and go and travel all over Japan and meet people, and meet, mostly farmers, but also fishermen and people who raise animals. And so for like a year, I got to really go in many places, and we created sort of a whole network of small farmers that we still work with.
Amazing. Wow. So, I mean, you are new to Japan in terms of that producers, but did that year completely made you familiarized with everything possible? I mean, not many Japanese chefs probably wouldn't have that opportunity, but because of your mindset, and I think it was a natural way to do that.
It was a great way to discover Japan, to go some places like this with that kind of a purpose, and go in many places you wouldn't necessarily go if you were just sort of traveling or being a tourist.
Right. Do you have any examples, the farmers you work with and you're impressed with?
Yeah. Well, there's a farm. Actually, it's not so far from Tokyo. It's in Kanagawa. Is that right? Yeah, Kanagawa. Called Show Farm. That's very much dedicated to now regenerative farming, and that's very very dynamic. It's a couple, and I was very impressed with them because they were both like farmers, but very much intellectuals. And we get produce from them almost every week now. And so that was one example of like a farm that I really, I mean, there's so many, we visited so many places.
Interesting. Yeah, probably, someone like you, Blind Donkey's concept really inspires newer generations of farms. And it's almost like win-win and win for restaurant, farmers, and the consumers. So
yeah, I mean, that's actually what we wanted to do. Our hope was to be in Tokyo and inspire young people to become farmers again, because I think the whole agriculture sort of culture in Japan is really going to change, and we thought it was really important to try to get young farmers the young people to start farming again, and so that was kind of a really like try to make it hip but it's not that simple.
Right. So the old image, I'm just looking at the show farm you just mentioned. I was curious. Their product line is amazing. So very beautiful packaging and something you never see, like birch syrup and hawthornberry tincture. All those things you really feel like, oh wow, farming is interesting. You can make money out of it because you need the processing and the packaging, and you can be sustainable as a business. And you really introduce people to those great new flavors. So this is Show Farm. It's ACHOfarm.com. That's interesting. Right. And by the way, why did you name your restaurant Blind Donkey?
It's I read a book about the famous Japanese Zen master called EQ when I was at the Zen Center, and in that book, if I remember right, it said that EQ was kind of a sort of, I don't know how to qualify it, but maybe eccentric kind of Zen master. And was also like a poet and an artist, and they had a place in Kyoto called the Blind Donkey where he would teach the Dharma and make art, and that always stuck with me. And I think, if I ever have a restaurant, I'll call it the Blind Donkey, because it doesn't sound like a restaurant, and people will go, what is this, the Blind Donkey? So that's always kind of a good attitude to have, to ask, like, what is this? Why is it called the Blind Donkey?
I have to look up. But EQ was really, he was in the 14th and 15th centuries, and he was a monk, but like you said, he was very cultured people, and there's so many different stories, what he did, and there's an anime when I grew up. So it's interesting.
Apparently he's like a folk hero. Yeah, I've never seen the anime, but the book that I read was kind of, I think, Zen's red thread, and I think it was more about this sort of very, I don't know, sort of different way of teaching Zen that he had, and they make it sound like it wasn't really like, like it wasn't really for kids. I don't know how to say that.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Behind each episode of the anime, I remember there's like a kind of koan, like very seemingly unresolvable question. But this EQ little boy solved it. It's like, whoa, and everybody sounds like, whoa.
Nice.
Right. Anyway, so we'll take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll discuss Jerome's new restaurant, CIMI, and his vision for sustainable food. So please stay with us.
Today's program is brought to you by Korin, a supplier of Japanese chef knives and restaurant supplies. Korean is proud of their Japanese culture and traditions, but they want you to know that their products are not just for Japanese restaurants. Their knives and tableware bring out the best qualities of food from every culture and fit into every restaurant, from French to Pan Asian to American, and that is why they are located in New York City, where people from every country in the world come to eat. Korean's Tribeca showroom is home to the most extensive collection of Japanese chef knives in the world, including Japan. Stop by to view their exquisitely designed tableware and the Welsh natural sharpening stones. They have a whole range of knife services, from repair and rust removal to reshaping and realigning. Korean is dedicated to this ideal, bringing the highest quality Japanese design to your table, so you can experience the unparalleled quality of Japanese craftsmanship in your home or restaurant. For more information, visit korean.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Japan Eats on Heritage Radio Network, HRN. I'm your host, Akiko Katayama. My guest today is Jerome Ward, who is the former chef at the legendary farm-to-table restaurant, Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California. He moved to Tokyo in 2016 and opened the famed Blind Donkey restaurant. Since then, he has been busy pursuing great sustainable food systems in Japan. So in March 2024, you opened another restaurant called CIMI restaurant. So what is the concept of CIMI and why did you open it?
Well, we opened it because it's a little bit of a long story, but well, one of our first employee at the Blind Donkey is a young woman called Mukai Tomo, that actually staged at Chez Panisse for 3 months. And then when she was there, they told her that, one of the chefs, me, just moved to Tokyo. And so when she came back to Tokyo, she looked for us, and she had never really cooked a little bit, but she was working more in an NPO before. And then she started working with us. And then, when was it? Like a year and a half, 2 years ago, we had to move. The Blind Donkey had to move to a new location, and she didn't want to be part of the new restaurant, if you want. And I had this idea of doing a restaurant. I mean, the idea, I don't know if I should say that, but at first I wanted to call it veganish. Because I was interested sort of in not so much vegan food, but the vegan attitude was kind of a little bit of to me anyway, sort of an extreme attitude towards food. And I felt like that was sort of inspiring in the sense that things are becoming so difficult now for farmers and for the climate and everything, that kind of attitude was necessary in some ways. And really my ambition was to try to find a new way of cooking and presenting food. Because I went, when I was in San Francisco, I went to this big co-op, and I was looking at their vegan food section, and a lot of vegan food seems like was imitation of things that we eat, and some of them have meat in it, like hamburgers and enchiladas, and I was thinking, that's kind of weird. But what, for me, it was just sort of an inspiration for me. What would be kind of a vegan cuisine that would be sort of really inspired by nature and wouldn't try to sort of imitate normal food, but using using only vegetables. So that was the idea, and then another idea was sort of another inspiration was South Indian food, which is vegetarian, not vegan, but which is kind of really a whole system of eating that's very coherent and very old. And I was like, how could we make like sort of a menu that would reflect this sort of vegan attitude of plant-based, that would be really plant-based, but would be really nature base too. If that makes
Right,
any
and
sense.
right, and then CIMI, CIMI, in Japanese, it's earth taste, right? So
Yes. So that,
really,
yeah. So I wanted to call it veganish, but people say, vegan. If you call it vegan, people are going to think it's a vegan restaurant, and that's kind of a very niche thing, especially in Tokyo. I thought it was funny, but then the chef Tomo, who is the chef now, found this word chimi. And she wanted to call it that, and I say, okay, well, let's call it that, and maybe that's a little bit better. And then it's called Chimi Restaurant, and restaurant is written with a O instead of AU, because it's about sort of restorative ID or regenerative IDs.
right.
And yeah, and so yeah, after, when we decided not to call it veganish, I said maybe we call it the restaurant with a O. And then everybody was saying, yeah, but that doesn't work in Tokyo, because when people are going to look for the restaurant, this sort of play on words that works kind of nicely in English, in katakana, and it's just confusing and it doesn't work. So that's how it became called Chimi Restaurant with a O.
Right, interesting. Yeah, this is very well named, very deep, and I think eventually people understand the meaning of restore and nurture yourself. So, but it's the Tomo, her name, your co-chef or the co-founder, she's Tomo Mukai, right? She seems to be
Yes.
really passionate about it. So, yeah, and then sustainable food is such a keyword for everybody globally. And in your mind, what does it mean? Like, this vegan, vegetarian, those plant-based food is part of it. But what does it mean for you to be sustainable? And what is the most crucial point to maintain sustainable food systems for you?
Well, I mean,
because you are the most exposed, long time, well thought out human being. I can't find anybody even more than you, and maybe like Alice Waters is the equivalent. So what do you think?
Well, as I said, like when we started the Blind Donkey, it was really like a window to the work of farmers, because we thought, as far as food is concerned, farmers are the one who sort of deal with nature and the soil, and so they are sort of our direct connection to the health of the planet, if you will, because they really take care of the soil. I mean, farming is really taking care of the soil. The plant, they grow by themselves, but you need to create an environment to grow the things that you need.
Right. Well, I think to me, as far as I listen to you, your mind is how you directly connect with nature or earth to make something you are already given, and then without interrupting the relationship between us human beings and what we're given. Because farming, some people like to eat protein, animal protein, that energizes their body too. So that's another thing. And everybody's different, right? To me, I can't be vegetarian, vegan. I tried once and I got really sick. Some people need, right? It's like you can't have like one diet for everybody. And then the way you approach different diet, like through Blind Donkey and CIMI, you explore what's optimal for everybody. And it's an ongoing project, I think. Your definition of sustainability probably never get fixated, because you always pursue something better for changing environment.
Yeah. So I think what's important is that we need to stay connected with the natural world, because that's kind of, especially in urban environment, I think people are very disconnected from from sort of the woods and the rivers, and I mean, people go and walk in nature, but they're not really feeling it every day, and because we become sort of disconnected with the natural cycles, we've made a lot of decisions that are sort of endangering our planet, really. And so this connection is really important, and that's why we work with small farmers, and we present the food very simply, so you can really taste the produce and the vegetables, and so have sort of a direct and a little bit visceral relationship with the food.
Mm.
So
Right.
that's really important. But as far as sustainability, yeah, that's such a, like, I don't know what it means anymore, because I don't know where we're going as far as agriculture is concerned, and so we decided that for us, what is important is really to try to help support small natural farmers, people who really work again with the soil and work with the elements, and grow things that are both beneficial for us, but also beneficial for the well-being of the landscape and of the planet, really. And so, to go back to CIMI is kind of like a step a little bit further. It's like we wanted to think about how can we serve things that are good for us, restore our health, but also restore the health of the landscape where they grow. And so for me, it was kind of another way of thinking about food, a new way to think about food, and really sort of be very precise about, like, okay, what happened when we serve this, like how this is grown, and what's its effect, or how grown or harvested, and what's its effect on its environment as a whole. So, for example, we serve venison because there's a problem in Japan with deers, because the natural cycles have been so disrupted, and the Satoyama has been so depleted that there's too many deers now, and they damage, like, the crop that we grow, but they also damage the forest because they can't find enough things to eat. And so at this point, if you're going to eat meat, eat deer meat, venison is helping the forest to regenerate itself in some ways. It helps, control the numbers of animals, and so it is beneficial also for the environment. So,
Right.
we
Yeah,
try
we
to
tend to forget the idea of food chain, right? Because some animals look cute and people hesitate, don't kill them. And but we kill flies without even thinking. So that's kind of a mindset, but we are all connected and we have to create the balance. And I think what you're saying is really making sense. And just to add that connection with the earth and nature, you are, in addition to running Blind Donkey and Jimmy Restaurant, you have been involved in an interesting project called the Food Hub Project, based in Tokushima Prefecture, in Shikoku Island, where you are right now too. So,
That's right.
actually, one of the founding members of the Food Hub Project, Teichi Manabe, joined us in episode 147 in 2019. And it was still the earlier stage of the project, but it seems really doing well. So, first of all, what is the Food Hub Project, and what is the goal of the Food Hub Project?
Yes. So Manabe-san is actually the person that organized the whole artistic events that I was talking about earlier when we first came to Japan for a month. And he's the one who coordinated everything, which was a crazy job. And so we became friends, and then he discovered Chez Panisse and sort of the California lifestyle, and sort of being, both a chef and an artist. And so he decided to come back he's from this area, not from Kamiyama, but not far, and to start like an organic farm and a restaurant and a bakery. And so, and also some educational things they do. So that's basically the sort of bring this idea in Japan and try to make it sustainable, financially, and sort of maybe also create a model for other places, because Kamiyama is a very active place now that's attracting a lot of talents from many different sort of works of life, and so that's the food hub is part of that, and yeah.
So just for listeners who are not familiar with this tiny little town, Kamiyama, it's the population is around or under 5,000. And then the whole town started to make some more efforts to revitalize the local community, because there's a depopulation and aging. It's all throughout the country, throughout the world now. So they started the project in 2015, and then they just really discussed hard. And then I think Taichi Manabe, he actually moved the whole family in a very beautiful local area. And you cannot be closer to nature. And you can farm, you can talk with the community, passionate about what to do in this beautiful place. And I heard even Kamiyama started high school, like very young, talented people go there.
Yes, it's kind of like a design school, and I think it's kind of project-based, and they just started. That's a pretty big project. I mean, there's a art residency here that's happening right now. Actually, there's 3 artists, 1 Japanese and 2 French, who come and spend a month or 2 months and do sort of a project that has to do with, the community here.
Right. So listeners, if you are interested in revitalization of local community, it's Kamiyama. It's a tiny little town, but it's really a good model project.
Yes, and it's become very popular, and there's actually a big article in this month in Vogue, if you want to check it out. Vogue Japan.
Right. And then no, but you are also it's a solid part of it. So at the Food Hub Project, you work as a mentor for the executive chef at the Kamaya, which is a restaurant in the Food Hub Project. So what is the concept of Kamaya, and what kind of menus does it serve?
Yes, so when I came here, the chef, I don't know what's her full name actually, Mogu-san, I can't remember. Was just sort of, they were doing lunches and teishoku style, but like Japanese style, and basically serving food for the community. And they also have as I said, that farm and a bakery. So it was like a whole sort of group of things. A lot of people come, and especially on the weekend, to visit. So it's a mix of local people and people who come here to spend the day. And then Taichi and I, we discussed sort of changing the teishoku from sort of Japanese classic home food to sort of a more like sort of Japanese feel. And for me, it was kind of interesting to take this idea of having 5 dishes. So that's set like that. 1 is rice, 1 is generally pickles, but not necessarily. And basically create with the 3 other dishes a small menu that would be just served, all together. So we started doing that, and at that time, I think because they were beginning and she didn't have a lot of experience, they were not even using the product from the farm or local produce. So I said, the first thing that you need to do is go and visit all the farmers around you. Some of them are working for Food Hub, and go and see what they have, and then make your menu. We decided to make a new menu every week. That's more practical. And see what they have, and make a menu out of that. So she was very excited to learn something new. I think she had a lot of experience, but more like sort of classic French. And that was like a whole new thing. And so she got very, very motivated, and every week. So every week now she calls all the local farmers and make a list, and we sit down and we make a menu out of that, and that's pretty interesting, because we always come up with something, even though, like, for example, last week there was really not a lot of things on the list, and it was pretty hard to make an attractive menu out of that. But we always do it, and I think that's, for example, that's a great way to learn to cook. I always thought like a great way for somebody at home who is interested in food is like open your refrigerator and try to make a nice meal with whatever is in there. And
right.
you can always find something, and that, constraint make good art. And so every week we come up with something, and I think the level has been pretty good, actually. Like, often, so we do the menu meeting, and then the following week when they start the menu, I come in the morning the first day, and then we do a tester, and we try it, like, kind of like I was explaining at Chez, Panisse, and correct a little bit things if it needs to. But I'm very impressed with her work, and it's pretty surprising to find that kind of food, in this little town here in the middle of Shikoku.
Right. Yeah. And then if you go to listeners, if you go to foodhub.co.jp, it's food, HUB, that one word, .co.jp. You can see the menu in the picture, and it's just, you can see this freshest thing, seasonal, local, really local produce and prepared. And I heard the water in Kamiyama is so good, and rice is already cooked in the middle of the kitchen, and it's really, you can taste real food in real term. So I have never been there, but I will definitely try to have a nice trip, because I've never been to that deeper part of Shikoku. So it's a beautiful place. Right. And then what have you learned so far from the experience at the Food Hub project so far? Because it's a new place, a new environment. It's kind of challenging theme to revitalize the local community, but you've done something very meaningful. So what have you been learning from the experience?
Well, I think I think that just what I was explaining, sort of on the smaller side of this idea, what I learned from Food Hub, that you can always make something delicious with whatever you have. I think that's really sort of the thing that impressed me the most, because I work with Food Hub in this very sort of narrow way, that just working with them and doing these menus, and as far as sort of the bigger pictures, that maybe it's that maybe having a restaurant somewhere is always kind a really like becomes sort of a center for a place. Having a restaurant like that, it attracts people. It creates a place where people come and they have lunch and they meet each other, and so it's important, I think, to, because when we were talking about sort of how do you attract young people, especially people who grew up in cities, to go back to the countryside, to be the next generation of farmers, I think it's important to create communities that are big enough and vibrant enough that that culture is part of it, because it's easy, especially in the countryside in Japan, but also in other places, to be really isolated and feel like, okay, I live in a countryside. There's not that much going on. There's not a lot of culture outside of the internet. So it's important to create really vibrant communities that have a lot of different things going on, like in Kamiyama, where there's IT, there's the art thing, there is food hub, there is a lot of craft people. Um, so that's, I think that's sort of the recipe for successfully maybe making the transition in Japan for Japanese agriculture. It was really sort of the old J system that's getting very old, and because the rural population is getting very old, and so they're becoming too old to take care of the land. And so what's going to happen next? I mean, that's kind of a huge question. And so, like what we're trying to do with the blind donkey and CIMI is very small, and we are not sort of trying to change sort of the economics of it, but we're trying to sort of bring a little bit of poetic inspiration to people to sort of reconnect with nature and reconnect with food, and hopefully inspire people to,
Right. And I think you have been really planting a lot of seeds for people to meet and remember the connection with nature through your two restaurants and then Kamiyama. So, and also you are an artist, right? So do you do some artwork in, maybe Kamiyama? And, there's so many things you probably are attracted to because you stay in Japan, like you expected, probably you never return to France or America.
Yes.
So, so how, and what part of Japan keeps you in the country? Like your artwork and food and everything included?
Well, that's a good question, actually. But because I knew when I moved to Japan to open a restaurant that sort of this California, let's say San Francisco Bay Area lifestyle that I had when I worked in this amazing restaurant and eat amazing food, and I still had plenty of time to do these art projects. Well, first that changed because San Francisco changed, so that sort of life wasn't really available anymore. But also moving to Japan and opening a restaurant, I knew that I was going to work 6 days a week, and that wasn't possible. And just now, actually, I've been in Kamiyama for 2.5 years, and I have a 2-year-old son, so that's taken a lot of my time. And then in the meantime, my wife started a forest school, so like sort of a very what's called also free school, but it's really they have 21 kids now from 6 to 12. And they're mostly outdoor, and it's all project based. And so she's been really busy. So I've been really busy sort of raising my kid and helping her out with the school. And just finally now things are settling down, and I found a place in the mountain to do an art studio that is just being finished now. And my new project is really it has nothing to do with food, really. Is to make one room dwelling, sort of a 6 tatami size structures that I want to make by hand, and I want to learn to do carpentry. And for me, it's a way of learning about Japanese craft and using sort of different kind of craftsmanship to build these little houses. So that's and I'm somehow I managed to find a place to do that, and I'm getting organized, but it's very new to me. I don't have that much skills as a carpenter. I mean, I like to make things, but I'm not very skillful. So it's a whole new adventure that starts, and I'm not sure where it's gonna go, but yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. Like how
Yeah.
inspiring is that you always doing something new. And when you moved to Japan, you never expected to open a restaurant in Japan so successfully. So now you're on to something new. So
Yeah.
what are your plans and dreams?
Well, so my plans is to sort of set up this sort of workshop and make this small building and to raise my kid here and help my wife with her school. And my dream would be to, somehow inspire new generations of Japanese people to come back in the countryside, because Japan is such a beautiful country and the countryside is such a powerful place. At the same time, it's a difficult place because it's not like California that has a lot of land. Everything is really fragmented. And as I said earlier, I really worry, I don't know if that's the right word, but about what's going to happen in the next years and the next 10 years with Japanese agriculture and rural life. And I think it's time to come back to the countryside like I did and sort of reconnect with the land and take care of it in ways that are sustainable. So I don't know what that will be, but probably a lot of sort of community farming and create sort of communities all over Japan that are based on sort of organic kind of natural farming sort of ideas, but are strong enough to sustain themselves, kind of like Kamiyama is. And it's nice to see that people are now. It's hard to find a house in Kamiyama. Like people are moving in and they can't find a
Wow.
house. It's that it's
Right. Then you can
so.
build new houses for them and you can
Yeah,
increase the
well,
population.
I want to make houses that are more sort of, like sort of inspired, sort of, if you want, by a tea room, but I don't want to make a tea room because that's such kind of a heavy traditional Japanese thing, and I don't want to pretend to be like that kind of a builder, but sort of in, like small places that could be, I mean, it could be a guest house, it could be a little studio, it could be a meditation room, but I really want to do it sort of like you make jewels, like very, very handmade and yeah.
Right. So I think you're presenting the model of what is possible, and you're actually managing two restaurants in Tokyo from Kamiyama as well. So I think the remote work is really realistically everywhere now, and I think young people can go back to very beautiful nature and grow vegetables, but also they can do high tech work at the same time. It's not a futuristic thing there; it's happening. So
No, exactly. I mean, that's I think that's what needs to happen, really. But
right,
it's,
and I don't think we
everybody
have a
wants to live in
choice.
this. Yeah, I mean, I love cities too. I love Tokyo. I understand why people want to live in cities. I mean, I do.
Right. Okay, so I can't wait to see what's going to happen in 3-5 years. So keep me posted.
Yeah.
And where can we
Okay.
find your updates online and on social media so that the listeners can follow you?
I mean, personally, I stopped doing my Instagram, and every week I say, "Oh, I'm going to start again," and then I just can't do it. I have no idea why, but both the Blind Donkey and CIMI restaurant have Instagram
Right.
accounts, so
Okay.
you can keep up
Yeah.
to
So
speed with.
CIMI is CIMI underscore restaurant. It's
Yeah,
RESTORNT
exactly.
restaurant.
Yes.
And the Blind Donkey, theblinddonkey.jp. I mean, that's the
Yes,
the Instagram,
exactly.
right?
Yes,
Right.
and but if I start making these little houses, I think I'm gonna get back online and sort of try to document a little bit the process, because I think it's important. And yeah, and
Right.
also I'm sort of planning. I've been starting a little bit to do a digital magazine. And I sort of made a model, and then, my kid was born, and I moved here, and there was so many things going on that I didn't have time. But I'm hoping now I have sort of met the right people to maybe next year start this online magazine. Would be sort of based on food and culture. So, like, for example, the model that I made was about roots. So there was rooted, uprooted, and unrooted. And then we play with this, talking about, for example, uprooted. So talking about hydroponic kind of farming, for example, which is roots without soil. But also, like, talking about communities that are like sort of like gypsies, for example, who don't have roots. So sort of make sort of connection, that using words that sort of connect food and culture in sort of surprising way. That's
Right.
sort of the idea.
So the updates can be on your Instagram, Jerome Ward. Is that
that
the place to
one's
follow?
not been that one's not been I don't want people to go there because I haven't posted anything in years. So
Okay,
but now after this conversation, maybe I'll be kind of inspired to, like, okay, maybe I should start sort of
Right.
connecting a little bit with personally. I mean,
I
with
started
the
following
outer
you.
world.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So keep me posted, and maybe you can come back when everything is a little settled down. And you have so much to share with us. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jerome.
Well, thank you for your interest. Yeah, that's very sweet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, listeners, if you have any questions or comments about the show or suggestions for show topics or guests, please contact us at japaneats@heritageradionetwork.org or at kikokatema.com. Japaneats is a weekly program. It's always available at heritageradionetwork.org, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify as a podcast. Our engineer is Amen Spenjan, and thank you for listening. I will see you next week. Japan Eats is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.
Hey listeners, thank you so much for listening to HRN. We want to make your experience as a listener even better, and to help us do that, we'd love your input on our audience survey. It'll only take a few minutes, and by completing it, you can enter to win a $250 gift card from Goldbelly. Visit heritageradionetwork.org/survey to take the survey and to help us keep growing and improving. That's heritageradionetwork.org/survey. Thanks for your support.